They attacked a human outpost. They had no idea who was stationed there. The signal came from a planet that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Inside the command deck, a warning array flashed a cold blue light against the metallic walls. War Master Krish looked at the tactical map where a small human outpost showed a single flashing point. The automated systems had marked the coordinates for an immediate strike, assuming the facility held only simple farming tools. They attacked the position with heavy orbital arrays, confident that the sector was empty of any real defense. But the transmission coming back from the dust-shrouded moon carried a voice that didn't sound like a civilian administrator. It belonged to someone who had spent cycles directing fleets, someone currently stationed where no one could find them. Would you have stayed or would you have run? Because Arthur Lawson didn't run, let's see what they woke up. Cycles before the blockade, the central database of the consolidation held records for every sector of the cosmos. Scribes had cataloged 34 star systems under the Grand Rule, tracking resources down to the final grain of ore. The high chamber on the capital world smelled of old iron and chemical air scrubbers. War Master Krish stood at the bronze center podium, his dark chest plates catching the cold light from the high glass ceiling. He signed the electronic paper to clear Station 808, noting that the files showed a tiny group of civilians holding the ground. The automated reports claimed the frontier base held nothing but low-yield colonial infrastructure. To an empire that measured its power by the scale of its borders, the outpost was just a line to be wiped away. Elder Shara sat in the upper rows, her heavy ceremonial robes rustling as she adjusted her position. She knew that the system registries often dropped names when a territory stayed quiet for too long. She told Krish to check the personnel ledger before sending the fleet, but her warning was met with a brief shrug. The vanguard had already taken its path, its commanders moving with the absolute certainty of an army that had never faced an equal wall. On the surface of Station 808, the ground was a dull gray mass under a dark sky. Commander Arthur Lawson sat at a scarred wooden table inside the security office, his unblinking obsidian synthetic eye reflecting the red glow of his control board. He was cleaning the nozzle of his titanium welding torch, striking the manual wheel until a thin blue flame held steady against the draft. His field jacket was faded, its markings torn away cycles ago after the final campaigns of the home fleet ended. The tactical screen in front of him suddenly filled with hostile markers as 4 heavy dreadnoughts dropped from the warp stream, locking their focus onto the central habitat ring. Lieutenant Alina Cruz checked the radar screens, her industrial prosthetic arm making a rhythmic clicking sound against the metal panel. She reported that the approaching warships had settled into a standard siege grid, a routine formation used to scare small colonies into a quick surrender. She took a bite of dry bread, her face calm as she waited for the order. The open channel began to hum as Krish broadcast his final ultimatum, giving the colony a brief moment to leave their homes before the orbital bombardment turned the soil to glass. Lawson did not reply to the voice echoing from the speaker. He set his torch down on the workbench, right next to an old photograph of an Earth retriever dog sitting on a green field. He looked up at the ceiling, listening to the deep vibration of the defensive power banks awakening inside the bedrock. The automated files in the Imperial database claimed this moon was an agricultural hub, but the deep crust infrastructure had been refitted over decades of quiet retirement. Every engineer, every mechanic, and every pilot who had left the service had settled here, bringing their old machinery with them. The surrounding asteroid field did not consist of simple rock. Deep inside the floating debris, thousands of magnetic containment nets received the signal from the security hut and dropped away cleanly. The rocky outer shells sheared off into the void, revealing the dark, angular hulls of 4 decommissioned supercarriers that had been parked inside the stones where no sensor could flag them. The massive vessels shifted their weight, their heavy mass accelerator turrets turning with perfect mechanical synchronization toward the Imperial fleet. Krish stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his target screens flicker before turning into a solid sheet of black. His tactical officer reported that a total systems blackout had spread across all ships, triggered by electronic warfare platforms disguised as standard cargo freighters. The automated tracking loops had died, leaving the dreadnoughts blind in the dark. The War Master ordered a manual visual override, his golden eyes widening as the silhouettes of the human capital ships rose from the fragmented ring of the planet. No warnings, no calls for terms, no survivors. The human supercarriers opened fire from their hidden positions, sending high-velocity kinetic slugs through the blinded Imperial lines. The Vanguard's escort brigs were severed by the crossfire within moments, their shields collapsing under a weight that the accounting sheets had completely omitted. The attack was clinical, executed with the rhythmic efficiency of a crew that had spent their lives studying the architecture of space warfare. Krish watched his fleet crumble into drift and ash, his bronze bracers catching the reflection of the burning hulls outside his window. Lawson stood by his console as the final transmission line cleared. He sent a short plain message back to the high chamber advising them to re-ink their maps before their next expansion. He turned the strike wheel of his torch one last time, turning off the fuel valve until the blue needle died. Across the council hall cycles later, the Grand Registry counted 12,000 bodies, but the administrators simply forgot to check how many of those bodies had already killed an empire. A physical data slate shifted silently in an empty Senate row.